It's very common to be scared of the dark. It's actually a human instinct that dates back to our ancestors. Many years ago, when our ancestors lived and slept out in the open, the dark was very dangerous. Because obviously, predators roamed at night and they had to stay aware in order to survive. Also, sensory deprivation is a natural source of fear. We can't see well in the dark, so we're left to our imagination to figure out what various sounds or shapes actually are. So the darkness plays tricks in the human eye, turning formless shadows into familiar shapes and faces. So when you wake up in the middle of the night and look to the corner of your room and all you see are shadows, but you blink and that shadow suddenly changes shape. You think, well, maybe it's just a pile of laundry on my chair, but the more you look, the more creepy the shadow looks, until it turns into a tall, looming figure with piercing red eyes, dressed in a long coat and a wide-brimmed hat. He doesn't move, he doesn't speak, he just watches you. And this isn't the plot of a horror movie. It's not just a ghost story passed around a campfire. People all over the world have claimed to see this tall, shadowy man. And they call him the Hat Man. Welcome back to another episode of Weirded Out. I'm Maria and I cover true crime cases, weird, creepy things, and mysterious stories. If you're into all that, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Today, we are diving into one of the most sinister and creepy entities. Who is the Hat Man? Where does he come from? And why do so many people from different cultures, countries, and time periods see the exact same thing? I have myself had an experience with the Hat Man when I was a kid, and I am a little bit biased, but we'll see multiple different stories, we'll go into theories and everything there is about the Hat Man. So buckle up because this is about to get weird. So first things first, what or who is the Hat Man? If you've never heard about him before, you might be thinking, okay, well, it's just another ghost story. But no, this is actually quite different. This one comes with thousands of accounts from real people. So the Hat Man is a shadowy figure that people have claimed to have encountered, often in their bedrooms, in dark hallways, or in places where they feel a deep sense of unease. But before we talk about the Hat Man, we first need to talk about shadow people. Now, shadow people is a phenomenon that has been reported for centuries. They are dark, humanoid figures that appear in the periphery of your vision or stand motionless in the corners of dimly lit rooms. And unlike ghosts who are described as translucent or mist-like, shadow people are actually just pitch black. It's almost like they're a living void. And it's not just a creepypasta, it's not just something created on Reddit, it's not an imagination from people. Of course, a lot of people have seen shadow people, but it's also deeply engraved in culture and folklore. Ancient folklore from different cultures describe similar entities. Jinn in Middle Eastern mythology, night demons in European folklore, and spirits like yokai in Japanese legends. Now, the term shadow people gained mainstream attention in the early 2000s because of a radio show called Coast to Coast AM program, where countless listeners called in to share their experiences. But out of all of those shadow people sightings, one of them stood out, the one with the hat. A lot of people called the show describing their experience seeing this man and this creepy hat. They've explained how the Hat Man lingers, observes, and sometimes even interacts with them in rare cases. And that made a lot of people start thinking that he's not just a normal shadow person, he's much more. So what does the Hat Man really look like, apart from just being a man with a hat? Well, witnesses describe him as being really tall, sometimes unnaturally tall. They describe him with a long cloak or a coat and a wide-brimmed hat. Some people say it's more like a fedora, other people say it's more like an old-fashioned top hat, but he is always completely black. It's like a shadow given form. And most people describe him with no face, no features whatsoever. But there's also some people who describe with piercing red eyes or glowing white eyes. So most people who are visited by the Headman report feeling a sense of dread, evil, or danger. But occasionally, some other witnesses describe him as feeling neutral or even like a guardian angel. Those people who see him in a positive way say that when he appears as a guardian, it's times that those people are in an extreme crisis, almost as if he's watching over that person, or rather than terrorizing them. And other reports claim that people in dangerous situations, such as near-death experiences, will see the Headman, but they didn't feel threatened, they felt a sense of peace. But those positive and peaceful encounters are a very small minority compared to the big amount of people that are terrified when they encounter the Headman. Also, sometimes people see the Headman holding a gold watch, and he seems to regularly check the time as if he's waiting for something to happen, or he's there watching you for a specific amount of time. And he usually shows up while people are sleeping or they just woke up. And most people report him showing up during times in their life of extreme stress. And even though there are people who have said that the Headman attacked them, this is very rare. He usually doesn't attack or interact with the person. He's just there standing and watching you. But those rare cases where the Headman actually does attack have people reporting that they see the Headman walking towards them and then he chokes them until they fall back asleep. And some people describe feeling a tingling sensation on their scalp after the Headman attacks. And as far as I know, there has never been anyone that has been killed, died because of the Headman. But let's be real, if you did die, we wouldn't know, right? You wouldn't be here to tell us the story. So maybe it did happen. Now, why the hat, right? Why is it the Headman needs to have an accessory when all the other shadow people don't? Well, some people believe that the hat is actually a psychological trick because hats are associated with authority figures, and maybe his appearance is designed to invoke fear and submission. Others think that maybe this is a clue to his origins. Maybe it's a very old ghost that lived in a time where hats were very common. But we can't answer those questions without thinking about where the Headman actually comes from and why do so many people see him. Now, Google Trends actually show that searches for the Headman has peaked in May of 2020 during the height of the pandemic. Like we talked before, the Headman shows himself mostly in times when people are under a lot of stress. So it's not surprising that 2020 sightings of the Headman increased as it was the start of the pandemic and we were all really stressed out. But these yearly encounters aren't just a recent phenomenon, and some believe that the earliest accounts date back centuries. You can actually hear a lot about shadowy figures that wear a hat appearing in different folklore, and in a lot of other cultures, such shadowy figures were considered as omens of death or messengers from another realm. Something else that was really interesting that I found is that among the native people in South Dakota, there's a legend of a dark figure known as Tall Man, or also known as Walking Sam. He's described as towering over 7 feet tall, slender with long limbs, and often wearing a black stovepipe hat, which is a very similar description of the Headman. Some sources even describe Tall Man as being between 12 and 15 feet, covered in hair, with red eyes, and emitting a foul odor. Now, I was really intrigued by this during my research, and I really wanted to understand more about this Tall Man. And it seems like the Tall Man legend is very connected to the tragic history of the Lakota people, especially the 1819 Wooden Knee Massacre, where US soldiers killed many unarmed Lakota citizens. including women and children. Now, this was, of course, a really traumatic event, and alongside other ongoing issues like poverty and substance abuse, this contributed to high suicide rates at the time, especially among younger people. So, because of that, the tall man is often considered a suicide spirit. He was believed to show up for younger people and influence their minds and tricking them into self-harming in order for him to collect their soul. Now, with all of this, we can see that the recurring theme of this dark hat-wearing entity figure across various cultures is very intriguing. Could any of this have influenced any modern reports of those shadowy entities? Is the Hatman the same thing that all those people back many centuries ago were seeing? But only in the 20th century is when the Hatman became extremely popular, and many credit a researcher and author Heidi Hollis. She has written extensively about shadow people and the Hatman, and her theory is that he's not just a figment of our imagination or a sleep paralysis hallucination, which we'll talk about in the theories part later on, but she believes he's something much more real and dangerous. She even has a book called The Hatman, The True Story of Evil Encounters, where she details terrifying first-hand accounts of the Hatman. And with the prevalence of all those sightings and the internet becoming so popular in the early 2000s, so many people were talking about the Hatman and their experiences. And because of that, a guy named Timothy M. Brown Jr. decided that he wanted to start his own project to allow people to tell their story about the Hatman. So in 2001, he founded a website called the Hatman Project. This was all because he had his own experience with the Hatman when he was 14 years old. So on his website, he is collecting stories about the Hatman, and he also tells his own story. So he said, the purpose of the site is to research the phenomenon that has come to be known as the Hatman. Reports of the Hatman and other shadow beings have been on the rise within the last several decades. It was due to my own experience with this being, as well as my awareness of other people's sightings of the Hatman, that I decided to begin this research project. So all of this, his website, forums like 4chan and Reddit, have all made this big Hatman phenomenon grow so much. It's almost like the more we talk about him, the more he exists, and the more confused we are about who he actually is. And until we get the Hatman to sit down for an interview, we're probably never gonna know, and all we can do is speculate. And that's exactly what we're here to do. So let's dive into some theories behind the Hatman. And later I'll share some first-hand encounters that might just make you even more confused. So let's start with the first and most popular theory, which is that the Hatman is a hallucination caused by sleep paralysis. Now, if you don't know what sleep paralysis is or never experienced it, well, good for you, because it's horrible, it's terrifying. But sleep paralysis is something that has baffled scientists for centuries. The earliest clinical account of sleep paralysis dates back to 1664, when a Dutch doctor published a collection of case studies for his patients, and one of those cases was titled Of the Nightmare, where he describes the experience of a 50-year-old woman who woke up in the middle of the night and couldn't move and saw something. And she claimed that she went to sleep and the devil laid upon her and held her down. When you have a sleep paralysis episode, you are not able to move, and some of the times it feels like you can't breathe. And when you have like a vision, a hallucination of something like a shadowy figure, it's when they come towards you, and most of the time they either hold you down or they choke you until you either go back to sleep or you snap out of it. And sleep paralysis has also been discussed in many supernatural conversations. There's a lot of theories about sleep paralysis being related to magic curses or mythical monsters and things like that. But I think this is a conversation for a sleep paralysis episode, so I'm not gonna go too deep into it. Basically, it wasn't until the 20th century when scientists actually started to move away from the mythological explanations and looked into more of a physical explanation to the phenomenon. But sleep paralysis is now believed to be when your brain basically wakes up before your body, which causes a temporary state where you're conscious but your body is still sleeping. And with that, of course, you feel an intense fear and anxiety and the feeling of a presence in the room and sometimes hallucinations. And the Hatman could be one of those hallucinations from sleep paralysis. It could be a shared hallucination. A lot of people might be seeing the same thing. Our brain maybe is filling the blanks with a universally terrifying image. Maybe everyone is seeing this guy with a hat because our brain thinks it's something common, even though we never see people with hats. Honestly, when was the last time you saw someone on the street with a hat? And also, if it's just sleep paralysis, then why is it that there are people who claim they've seen the Hatman while they were awake? Now, the Hatman could really well be a hallucination. There's a lot of people who see the Hatman because of drug consumption. Specifically, people all over the internet who have claimed that they see the Hatman when they take a lot of Benadryl. So they claim that taking too much of that drug can bring on hallucinations, including sightings of shadow people. And this has become extremely popular all over the internet, especially Reddit and 4chan, where people are actually purposely taking high dosages of Benadryl in order to try and see the Hatman. Then they will go back on Reddit and do a trip report to say what they saw, what all the shadow figures they saw, if they saw the Hatman. And let's just remember that Benadryl can cause a lot of issues if you take it in high doses. You could even die from it. So don't try it. Don't try it, please. Now, apart from hallucinations and sleep paralysis and all that, there's also the paranormal side of things. Many people believe that a Hatman is a supernatural entity, maybe a demon or a ghost, or, like I said before at the beginning, an omen of death. A lot of people believe that he feeds off fear and that he draws energy from terrified witnesses, and that's what keeps him alive. And a lot of those paranormal theories actually come from people who see him awake and they are trying to say, listen, it's not possible, it's just sleep paralysis. I've seen this dude while walking on the street. And then, of course, there are the wilder theories. I don't know if I quite believe them, if I think it's interesting. It's an interesting theory, but I don't know if I believe it. Is that the Hatman isn't a ghost or an hallucination, but something from another dimension. Some people say that he could be an entity that's slipping between realms. So he appears when the fabric of reality is thin, and others connect him to extraterrestrials. Did I say that right? Extraterrestrials, aliens. And they're saying that maybe he's some type of non-human intelligence and he's here to watch us and study us or even manipulate us. And that is a very interesting theory, I'm not gonna lie, even though I don't think it's real, but it's very interesting because of the fact that a lot of people claim that after they see the Hatman, they experience this sense of memory loss. Like they don't really remember what happened. They remember seeing him, but it's like something is missing. So what if this alien being that is the Hatman is modifying people's memories because they don't want us to see what his actual form is like? So he shows as a human-like figure, something that will make us feel a little bit more comfortable. And he's there doing something like, I don't know, studying us or whatever he's doing, but he doesn't want us to actually remember his real shape. It's an interesting theory. Is it true? I don't know. I don't think so. But here's what really blows my mind. How can so many people from different cultures report seeing the exact same thing? That's what I mean. It's not possible in my head that it's just something as simple as sleep paralysis. And there are tons of stories out there. Some people, like I said, see the Hatman while they're trapped in sleep paralysis. Some see him while awake. So I'll let you decide what you think is the theory or the true theory at the end of this, but let's talk about some real life encounters. So the first story I want to tell you is one from Reddit. This is about a person who worked as a bartender at a small hotel in Cincinnati, and the hotel already had a bad reputation for being haunted or having like weird kind of feeling to it, and the employees have claimed they have all seen the Hatman. I was a bartender at a small hotel in Cincinnati for a year. It is known not widely for being haunted. The chef, manager, and several workers have all seen a 6-7 foot tall shadowy figure wearing a pinstripe suit and a fedora, standing or floating past them. One night around 2 a.m., a co-worker and I were finishing up paperwork. She left the dining room to put it away, turned to the corner, and immediately backed up. She turned to me with tears in her eyes and said, "I just saw the Hatman." Freaked me the hell out. I've never personally seen it myself, but one night I slept in one of the rooms at the hotel, a room where a woman had died of a heart attack a couple years prior. That night I had my first and only experience with sleep paralysis. So, okay, let's pause for a second. This guy had never seen the Hatman before, which is fine. All of his coworkers did. He didn't. And he never had sleep paralysis before. So you're telling me that as soon as he sleeps in this hotel, he has sleep paralysis? I don't know. I mean, maybe the Hatman has nothing to do with this, and maybe that place is haunted in many different ways. Honestly, I would quit my job. Okay, so this next story now is an example of someone who doesn't feel the sense of dread when they see the Hatman. They actually have a calm feeling, and to me, that's even creepier. My sister told me that some nights she wakes up to see a man in a hat standing in her doorway. But she's not scared. She just looks at him and goes back to sleep. But then, a few nights ago, she said the Hatman was standing next to her bed. Again, she wasn't scared, she just fell asleep. But here's what bothers me. She recently told me that she started hearing stomping around her bed and into the hallway. And that terrified her. A week before that, she said she felt something caressing her back. She swears it wasn't a dream. She has 2 sons, and one of them is 7. He hates sleeping alone and refuses to stay in his room when his brother is gone. My sister won't let me ask him if he's ever seen something at night. I think she's afraid of the answer. Well, okay, so you're telling me that you saw this man standing in your doorway and you weren't scared, and she has never done anything about it. Well, I don't know. I think this is crazy. And especially the kid saying that he refuses to sleep alone. That kid is seeing the Hatman. He is seeing the Hatman, and that is crazy. Call an exorcist. That's all I have to say. Now, the next one comes from the paranormal subreddit. It's my favorite subreddit. I love reading it in the middle of the night when I'm about to go to sleep and make myself have nightmares. So let me read this one to you, because if I can't sleep, you can't too. No, I'm joking. But let's get into it. So this happened about 8 years ago, but I still think about it all the time. So it was 2013. I was 12 years old, laying in bed, about to fall asleep. My room was completely dark. Then I heard slow footsteps, like really slow, right outside my room. At first I thought it was my sister going to the bathroom, but I never heard the door open. After a while, I finally turned over to face my open room, and I froze. There was a man standing in the farthest corner of my room, tall, shadowy, dressed in a long black coat with a big hat. And I swear to you, he was darker than the pitch black darkness of my room. It's like I could somehow see him through the darkness itself. He didn't move, he just stared. And I couldn't move either. I was completely frozen, staring at him, holding my breath, and then I woke up, just like that. I don't even remember falling asleep. 1 second, I was locked in this terrifying stare down, and the next, boom, I was waking up in the morning. Now, maybe you're thinking, okay, that sounds like sleep paralysis or a dream. I thought the same thing until I looked down and saw the two large footprints in the carpet, right where I had seen him standing the night before. Now, that is terrifying. And the last part that he says he was waking up without remembering falling asleep, that's something that I came across, like I said, in multiple Hatman encounters, and that goes back into our theory about the extraterrestrials, aliens, because it just makes sense. Like you're forgetting it. Maybe your memories are being wiped, or it could be sleep paralysis. And he said he saw footprints and he had physical evidence, but something else. He said in an edit that the picture was actually deleted. I don't know if he means that he deleted it or it deleted itself somehow, but unfortunately, we don't have that physical evidence. But I don't know. I still believe it. I think it's a ghost. And this is because I have my own personal experience with the Hatman. And it doesn't stop with me. No. My mom has had an experience with the Hatman, and also did my great grandma. Yeah, Hatman loves my family. So I was about 13, 14 years old. I was home alone with my dog. I was just watching TV, doing nothing important like a normal 13-year-old. And I started feeling this weird sense of dread, like something was wrong. You know, when you feel like there's someone watching you, or like you're sitting there and you feel someone coming near you, but nothing ever happens? That's exactly what I was feeling. And out of nowhere, my dog starts barking towards the hallway that leads to my parents' bedroom. And I remember just standing there and my heart was racing, and I just felt something is really wrong because my dog was fine and there's nobody else here. What is he barking at? So I decided to stand up and go look and see what my dog was so stressed about. And that's when I saw the tall, shadowy figure with a coat and a hat just standing in the corner of my parents' bedroom. And he was just there watching me. It's not like he was moving whatsoever. It's like he was frozen, just standing there. And he didn't have any facial features. There were no red eyes, no white glowing eyes. He was just full pitch black. It was just literally like a shadow with a hat, literally like that. And what freaked me out the most is that even though he didn't have eyes, technically, I could still sense him staring at me. And I don't think I've ever moved so fast in my whole life. I literally grabbed my dog and ran out of there so fast. And I didn't come back to my apartment until my family was back home. But here's what makes it even worse, is that when I told this to my mom recently about this experience, she didn't laugh at me or say you're crazy and stop, you were just seeing things. She told me about her experience, which is actually a lot worse. She said that one night she was lying in the bed, wide awake, when she started feeling the exact same feeling that I just described. This sense of something bad, like this anxiety, something bad's about to happen. And she looked down to the bottom of her bed and she saw the Hatman standing there staring at her. And she said he was really, really tall and the same as me. He didn't have eyes, it was just a shadowy figure with a hat. And she just couldn't stop looking at him. It was like she was frozen. After some time, what felt like forever, he started kind of shrinking. It's like he was lowering his body and slowly going under her bed. After that, she managed to close her eyes and force herself to fall asleep. And she wakes up the next morning extremely confused and not sure if this was a dream, if she had a sleep paralysis episode, if anything happened. what was that? She was extremely confused. And then she remembered about a story that my grandma told her about my great-grandma. And she had her encounter with the Hatman decades ago when she was just a young girl. So my family is from the countryside. At the time when my great-grandma was young, very common for her to ride a horse everywhere. So she would ride a horse to school, anywhere. So she was just riding that horse by herself, and that's when she noticed a really tall man walking towards her, and he was wearing a big hat and a long coat, which felt really strange because it's a very warm place. It was not winter, there was no reason for him to be wearing a coat. So she was instantly scared, and what made it even worse is that the man was walking towards her and she was walking towards the man, but it felt like they never actually got close. It's like they were forever trying to reach each other, but they never did, until he just disappeared. And he was just gone, like he just vanished in thin air. And it could have been that because it was so dark, she just imagined, or her mind was tricking her and making her see something that wasn't actually there. Or it could be that the Hatman has been following my family around for decades. But I do know one thing, is that I haven't seen the Hatman since that first encounter. Neither has my mom. I hope I don't see him. So Hatman, if you're listening, don't show up, please. I don't want to see you. So what do you think? Is the Hatman just the trick of the brain? Is it a mass hallucination, or is it something more? And if you have any experiences at all with the Hatman, please leave them in the comments, because I really enjoy reading those and I enjoy making myself scared for some reason. And no matter what you believe, the Hatman has for sure terrified thousands of people across the world, and if the stories are true, he might already be watching you too. So maybe tonight, when you turn off the lights, take one last look over your shoulder, just in case. So stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Bye!